If you would all stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, take the roll.
O'Connor.
Here.
Morrison. Here. Alms.
Here.
DeZiel.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Atkins Hoggett. Here. Hall.
Here.
All right. We have 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening. A couple things that I would like to say. First of all, we are not expecting action to take place on these tonight. This is the public hearing is for the. I'll get back to the action piece, I guess, in a minute. But the public hearing, obviously, is to hear from citizens here throughout the city of Hudson on their feelings on the developments that have been proposed. If there is action, it would likely be relative to what the council would like the Plan Commission to do. So, but we don't anticipate taking an up and down vote on any of the projects that are being proposed here this evening at City Council. So, also I'd like to point out that these issues were taken up at the Plan Commission at our last Plan Commission meeting. The Plan Commission listened to the people that were here in attendance to discuss the projects and deferred any type of action whatsoever until the council in its entirety had a chance to listen to the public hearings that were scheduled for this evening. So if you could please try to be brief. Generally we like to say 3 minutes, especially with a crowd the size that we have tonight. We do have a schedule that could take us well into the evening. And also try not to be repetitive. If somebody has said something already that you had as planned remarks, it would be nice and considerate if you just kind of said, that's already been said, we'll let it go at that. All right, so public hearing on a zoning map amendment from RM1 multiple family residential to RM2 multiple family residential, and a comprehensive plan amendment from medium density residential to high density residential at St. Croix County Tax Parcel 236-2041-00-000 Land Vest LLC. Given that we have 3 of these tonight and the description is just a rather technical description, I would ask Mike Johnson, our Community Development Director, to come up and explain each of these, well, one at a time, obviously. But the first one, if you could explain what the, where this is located and what the development proposal is.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The first public hearing in front of you tonight is the property of the 6.22 acres, more or less, located at the northwest quadrant of Hanley Road and Old Highway 35. The applicant, as the agenda states, is seeking a comprehensive plan amendment from medium density residential to high density residential and a rezoning from RM1 multiple family to RM2, which is our highest multiple family density zoning district.
Okay, so the public hearing, the first public hearing is specific to that parcel and that development proposal only. So is there anyone here who would like to comment on that? If you would, please, when you come up, give your name and address and let us know if you're from the city, from the town, from...
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Dwight Jordan, 615 Old Highway 35 South. I'm just south of the Hudson Theater. I'm in the township of Hudson. I have acreage across the road from Hudson Meadows. I attended the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago. I want to give credit to the thoughtfulness and discussion on this proposed development. I just want to go on record as saying that my biggest concern down there in that area right now is safety and traffic. I've lived on that road for 41 years. I've lost multiple dogs and cats. Thank goodness it's not been a human. Having said that, the discussion centered around the development 2 weeks ago on the forgotten corner of Hudson. I'd prefer to see it remain forgotten and go into a park. And our representative for the development company said that I think the quote is, I heard him say, "You can't stop us." I would like to see him stopped, and I'd like to leave it with one word: moratorium. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the council. I'm John Conley from 57 Meadowlark Lane. First thing I would like to ask is that before anybody takes a vote after the Planning Commission, if they could please go out to Meadowlark Lane and take a look at it. It's really not set up to have that cul-de-sac opened up. At the last Planning Commission meeting, it was stated that if the vote doesn't go to the high density, that they can open up the cul-de-sac without the council's permission and just have 194 cars come through our area. If you take a look at the housing area, it is not built for that type of traffic. There's the kids, it would be extremely dangerous. I don't have any little kids, but we just moved here last year, and going 15 miles an hour is fast in that area. And I can assure you that if you put that high density right adjacent to our property, there's going to be a lot of people taking a shortcut because they don't have the patience to go out on Old 35, and they're going to come zooming through the housing area to get to work or go to school or whatever. And I just urge all of you to please take a look at that because I think it would be very, very dangerous. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gail Connolly. I live at 57 Meadowlark Lane. I hope I'm not repeating some of the issues that John just brought forth, but our home was built in 2004. Hudson Meadows is a long-established community. The vacant area was only recently, I believe last fall, changed from commercial to the multifamily residential. When that change was made, I don't know if the Common Council and the City of Hudson Plan Commission were aware of the street plan in that area. Meadowlark Lane is a short S-curved road that meets Meadowlark Drive, where you have to turn to exit. That intersection is also a school bus pickup point. Even now, you have to be extremely cautious. Residents and visitors park on both sides of the street, which does not even now allow for two-way traffic. Children ride their bicycles and scooters on all of the sidewalks. Sometimes they even play in the roads, but that's okay. People are aware of that and they're careful. Adding a potential 194 cars at the designation, the zoning designation now, would be extremely hazardous and a grave safety issue. To me, that sounds like there will be up to 194 vehicles trying to get out of only 2 outlets in Hudson Meadows every morning, and then later in the day when kids and families are out and about, they're driving fast to get back in. And that does not even account for visitors going into that area. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Chris Sperry, 19 Robin Lane. So I actually moved to Hudson Meadows a year ago because it was a safe, quiet neighborhood. I do have young children. I wanted someplace that my kids could live, that they could walk across the street to their neighbors, and I wouldn't have to worry about a car speeding past. We have that small community atmosphere in Hudson Meadows right now. I'm not naive enough to think that the land won't be developed eventually. My ask is that if we allow it to be rezoned now into something high density, it's going to drastically change that community and that environment that we currently have, and it's not going to be for the better. I think the turnout here attests to that to a large degree. Additionally, Hudson Meadows is already lacking infrastructure to support its current residents. Old 35 isn't curbed. The intersection between Old 35 and Hanley is drastically in need of improvements. The intersection is dangerous to crossing traffic and especially precarious in the winter. We're lacking things like sidewalks and an inner park within walkable distance for our children. Adding all of these additional cars will just exacerbate this issue and make it even harder for our kids to be able to safely get through the neighborhood, much less that intersection to be safe in the winter. My ask of this council is that before we make changes to the current zoning or develop this land, that we take a step back and complete some considerable planning of what we want it to look like for the future. I understand that there's a comprehensive planning going on over the next year or over the foreseeable future. I'd like to see us wait to make decisions on this area until that's decided. We know Mayo has already purchased some of the land close by, But if we rezone it now and put apartments there, that's a line we can't undo. That's a place we can't go back on. It kind of sets the tone for that area, and that's not a tone that the residents want. I ask that we be planful and deliberate about how we develop the area and allow ourselves the opportunity to support the current residents and community and be smart about what's needed in that area before we go down that path. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Mike Youngren. I live at 66 Meadowlark Drive, and I echo very much the same sentiments that you've heard here this evening already. I do want to emphasize there are a ton of kids in that neighborhood, and it's nice to see that. And I worry about the safety for those kids should that cul-de-sac be opened up and traffic come through there. Because as been stated, people are going to use that. And I live right on the corner of Meadowlark Drive and Meadowlark Lane, so they're going to be going two sides of my residence. And I certainly don't want that to happen, traffic-wise, safety-wise. And I would echo the statement that was made. If you haven't already, please visit that site. Please visit that cul-de-sac and see what changes the proposed plan would change and how it would affect that neighborhood. I don't see any positives in that change. And I would certainly like to see the council give that serious consideration. And when the time comes, I know you have a ton of things on your agenda all the time and you're very busy people. But this is important to us in that neighborhood. And I would just leave you with this thought. If you visit it, and I hope that you do, if you lived there, what would your thought be? Would you want this to be in your neighborhood, a couple hundred feet from your home, and 300 and some cars traveling through there on a daily basis? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Mike Peterson. I live at 43 Canary Way. And I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but it reminded me of a situation that I had over 5 years ago. I asked that the city put a street light at the north entrance of the Hudson Meadows. And I tried to get it. It wasn't until I got up one morning, I drive into Minneapolis early in the morning on Fridays. And I turned and went down to get Hanley Road there. And there was a student walking to the bus stop that came out of nowhere. And I just barely saw her. It was snowing. It was and that road is so narrow. Even now when people bike there or walk there, they've only got about this much lane to walk in, and the traffic is going very fast. And they come down out of that hill, and they're speeding very quickly. But that one incident told me that there is a definite safety issue there. The street light is in now, but we still need something to do on the old 35 because that is a hazard. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm Dan Patrick from 66 Canary Way. I just want to share a little bit of background with you guys about what's been going on the last couple of weeks. A Facebook group was set up for our neighborhood. Everybody was invited, and this was talked about and shared. There's strong opposition on that Facebook page that we made. That's all anybody's been talking about in our neighborhood the last 2 weeks, the opposition about this. And not only that, we had some of our neighbors and friends going door to door this weekend, handing out flyers in opposition to try to get a big turnout like this. So I just want to let you guys know that before you make a decision. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Josh Madigan, 42 Meadowlark Drive. I've been a member of this community since 2001. I've lived in my house almost 6 years. This proposed change, I echo the sentiment that the people before me have kind of brought forward. The additional piece I'd like to add is the roundabouts. You add another 300 cars probably through those roundabouts every day. Those are in terrible shape as it is now. So some additional piece to think about while you go through your considerations, and I definitely hope you guys drive out, take a look. This is a terrible idea, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Nick Manor from 50 Meadowlark Drive, City of Hudson. I just want to throw out a couple numbers that I haven't heard yet. our existing community, 127 housing units.
Can you speak up a little, please?
Sure, 127 housing units in our, I believe, in our community there. So when you're looking at adding over 150 more units to a dense area, you're looking at doubling the head count for our area. That is extremely high for an already potentially unsafe situation with the streets and roads in the area and limited entry points to the community. So just want to make sure that that's been talked about as well here. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Pam Caduff, 58 Meadowlark Lane, and I agree with everything that's been said previously. I just bought my home last year. I looked at many communities. I bought Hudson. I came to that place. I bought a neighborhood. I bought a home, a retirement home, and what you're proposing would drastically change it. And I oppose it. I'm very worried about the traffic and the safety also. And I hope, like many have said, I hope you come and look at the neighborhood and reevaluate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mayor and Council, Matt Berg, 63 Canary. I just want to say I've been there since '06. 2 young kids that are now teenagers. That's aside the point. We don't have any green space or parks in that area. So everybody that has talked already, those are all valid points, and I would have talked about all of them, but I'm not going to do that. When I first moved in, there was supposed to be park space and a walking trail behind in the 6 acres to the north of the development, and that was never completed. And so now there's a park picnic table with a pavilion overhead that the kids go back and cops chase them back there because we've had a lot of riffraff, different things like that. So the green space and everything in Heritage Greens and the big parks across the road, we have 0. So that's another consideration that land, the park and ride for one, has a lot of, I would say, out of line activity also. The cops and sheriffs have been called for activity at that particular spot too. So the park and ride is definitely something that needs to be considered along with all this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments?
Move to close.
Second. Motion second to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion possible action on a zoning map amendment, multiple family residential to RM2, multiple family residential comprehensive plan amendment from medium density residential to high density residential at St. Croix County tax parcel 236-2041-000 -00-000 Landvest LLC. As I said, we're not looking for any action up or down on this tonight. We're looking for some type of I guess motion direction for the Plan Commission.
I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to have Mike Johnson come up and talk at all about some of the safety concerns and address those.
Sure. This is why we have the process, right? To hear from everybody, and I think it's important that everybody's voice is heard, and that we ultimately arrive at a resolution that makes sense. So, in your packet, you'll see a number of comments. I really tried to drill down into what the Plan Commission made comment on during that meeting. Obviously, one of the big concerns was traffic, and I think we heard it again here tonight that the access is a big issue. Trying to put whether it be 97 units directly onto Meadowlark without relief or having 2 access points. Those issues need to be dealt with. They need to be studied further. Glenn Van Wormer, our traffic engineer here, is here tonight to answer some questions on the traffic piece. You'll note that all the data that we included in the packet. And again, the reason the Plan Commission, their recommendation was directed specifically to postponing the decision to rezone until the future of the Department of Transportation's park and ride lot and Old Highway 35 access were determined. So we're working through that, understanding the process with what DOT or their prescribed process, whether that be annexation, working with them for an easement, for joint access, what would that look like? So we're in the midst of that. Obviously, there's a lot of research. I know Alderperson Alms and I had a good meeting with some of the neighborhood residents. Was that last week? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, I think, wasn't it?
So it's good to hear the concerns from everybody, and I think ultimately, we probably need to hear from the applicant too, to hear what they have to say from a response.
Gotcha. I guess my question would be, do we want to hear that tonight, or is this a presentation that happens at Plan Commission tomorrow?
Yeah, I think, absolutely, it could.
I would like to hear what kind of safety concerns are addressed within this plan in terms of outlet to 35, and is that a safety concern? I'd like to hear from Glenn, maybe.
Now or tomorrow?
Okay. Yeah.
Glenn, you want to?
This is what's known as a hot seat. We've looked at the numbers, the traffic numbers. There's quite a bit of traffic that's already there with 127 units. A lot of it goes south and out on Meadowlark Drive. A lot of it then goes down to Hanley and uses the interchange or continues west into the city. There's about 870 vehicles on that street right now, on Meadowlark Lane at Old Highway 35. This development will end up generating about another 1,000 cars a day. What we've tried to look at is there an option for access to where you could make that, provide a separate access point to Old Highway 35? And that's one of the things that's being researched right now. If you can keep the traffic out of that cul-de-sac and keep them off of that curve, that would be beneficial to safety in that particular, in the existing area. But that's something that you don't just say, well, let's do it. It's something where you have to talk to the town, you have to talk about the access control that exists on Old Highway 35. So there's a number of things that have to be researched before you can say we've got at least a different idea that might work better for the neighborhood and for any development that goes in. You could put in fourplexes instead of a high residential, and you still have 400 or 500 cars coming out of there. So it's not like you can have nothing come out of there unless you grow alfalfa, and I don't think that's in your zoning code.
Gotcha.
So I can't get in all the details because we haven't really got to that point yet.
You haven't delved into it, okay.
If there was access directly off of Old 35, how much traffic do you think would be going through the neighborhood from the apartment complex? Do you think that there would be very many?
Not much, because there's no benefit to them doing that.
Unless there's a lot of people waiting to get...
basically backtrack, go up a curved road, and then come down, and they'd be 160 feet further away from Hanley Road. So although people worry that one or two will cut through, any kind of development that you put down the end of the cul-de-sac is going to generate some traffic. If you can develop an alternate access route, then you'd have no traffic there. I shouldn't say no, you'd have very, very little.
Very little, okay.
One of the other things to consider is Old Highway 35, as one gentleman said, is relatively narrow, and as you continue to develop in that area with Mayo Clinic going further north, eventually you're going to have to look at what can we do to improve the safety of that road and how can we handle pedestrians, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing to think about is where are you going to have the intersections and how much traffic will be turning at those intersections. Left turns are a problem along any road, as anyone here knows. And so you'd like to say, can we split the traffic so that it goes to different intersections? We don't know what's going to happen in the township. It could develop, it could continue to be a farm field. But we have to think 20 or 30 years out from now and say, well, we've done some planning. Or at least our grandkids can say, thank God they did some planning.
Glenn, how long have you been a traffic engineer?
54 years.
How long of that has you worked in Hudson?
About 10 or 12.
Yeah, so what would your, as you say, is a hot seat, what's your recommendation as an experienced traffic engineer to put 1,000 more cars out there? Doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, I think the thing to look at is there an alternative that would provide a better option? And that should be looked at first. Then you can look at, well, if you can't do that, can you put those cars there? It would be difficult to say, put 1,000 cars on that narrow road and put up to, would be then be about 1,850 cars coming out on Meadowlark Lane, Meadowlark Drive.
So it wouldn't make sense as proposed.
It would not be something that you'd want to design. The cul-de-sac is there. The curved road was already put in by someone that wasn't thinking about what's going to happen on that open land down there. So now we got to somehow figure out how to get out of that little dilemma that we got into.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question actually for Mike. Thank you, Glenn. The current comp plan, Mike, does it contemplate growth to the east from Hudson Meadows?
No, does not.
Okay.
We do not have future land use criteria established for east of Old 35.
Gotcha. And I think that's sort of what I was at the root of at Plan Commission. What I was bringing up there is just looking at future use of it all. You know, if we are expanding, well, first of all, if we're taking Old 35 and bringing it into the city, doing curb and gutter, just being thoughtful to what the use is of that for a potential Mayo coming in and the development that happens at the theater, where that traffic flows, and then also development to the east, if it were to happen. I would just like to see a little bit more contemplation around the future use of that area. Does that make sense, or am I?
Yeah, that's a comprehensive planning type discussion. I know we're kicking that process off, obviously. In 2009, there was no vision. I mean, we had just finished off the business park. We had finished off Banterra, you know, the hospital, and that whole area was, you know, being developed. So I don't think there was the appetite to move further east, nor do I think it would make sense. But we do have to plan our transportation corridors for the long term, yes.
Maybe it's my impression that the section of the town of Hudson along that piece of Highway 35 is actually pretty well built out. There are no large open tracts of land. Mostly there are residences along there with their standard spacing.
You've got a few larger tracts. There's at least one 20-acre tract and a few probably 5 to 10 acre
which
ones on the
under
east
their
side.
zoning is not much traffic.
Yep.
I also question why we keep saying that's a narrow road. This is not. It's a used to be a state highway, and it's as wide as 35 north of here. So it's not a narrow road. It's actually a fairly high-speed road, and we probably need to do something to actually regulate the speed. Perhaps narrowing it, go down to 11-foot lanes, put shoulders on it. Those kinds of things. We need to be thinking about actually controlling the speed there. We probably need a four-way stop at Hanley and Old 35. There's we really need to look at that whole piece. It's not just how we access the road from those apartments. We have to look at that entire road from Stage Line to Hanley. So it's not a just how you know. And I will absolutely oppose opening up that cul-de-sac to the apartments, no matter what the situation. I cannot accept that. So.
Anything else? Anybody?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Nick Vivian. I represent the project. Just a couple of comments. First of all, with respect to access, I think what Glenn was saying was that taking 1,000 cars and pushing them north through Meadowlark doesn't make sense, as opposed to putting 1,000 cars on this particular property not making sense. Because our plan, our proposal, is certainly not to take 1,000 cars and to push it through on Meadowlark. That's not the proposal. In fact, what we've said is, to do this project, we need the outlet onto Old 35. And we've also had conversations with your staff to say that really what we would propose with respect to that road, and by the way, Meadowlark actually terminates at this property line. So you have a dedicated street that terminates at this property line, and I'm not certain that you could simply barricade that street there. But be that as it may, you know, our proposal is to say that Meadowlark can be used as an emergency access. That the city is far more interested in having Meadowlark as a secondary access than we are. From our perspective, we don't need traffic to flow north through the neighborhood. It's not necessary because, as Glenn pointed out, and as you see in the staff report, most of those vehicles are going to exit the parking lot onto Old 35, and then they're going to head south to Hanley, and either they're going to use the ramps onto 35 or they're going to continue west onto Hanley. And so the reality is that there will be some traffic that heads north on Old 35, but not much. The vast majority of this traffic is going to be headed south to 35 up to 94 or into the city via Hanley. So from that perspective, we've offered to sign the access as emergency access only. We've offered to utilize restrictive barriers that would only allow emergency vehicles to enter from the north. I think from a traffic circulation perspective, 2 access points are always preferred, because what happens if the access to Old 35 is blocked? Right? And then how do vehicles get out in the event of an emergency? So this isn't the developer suggesting that we want to create a situation that would drive traffic into the neighborhood. This is a question of how do we create a good development that's safe, that has access in and out for emergency personnel, but primarily relieves the traffic onto Old 35 so that it doesn't impact the neighborhood. So that's the point that I'd like to make there. When you look at the traffic numbers, of course there's no traffic data for Meadowlark or for Old 35, but when you look at the actual trip volume that the DOT provides, the nearest trip volume is on and off of the exit ramps onto 35, and you see that comparative throughout the city, those are some of the lowest utilized major roadways in the city. And so, you know, I appreciate the residents who Hudson Meadows is a PRD 2, and so there is more density there, and there are trips that are generated. But comparative to the city at large, this area does not share the same traffic volume as other areas in the city that have traffic concerns. And so just comparing those numbers against other areas of the city, even if you add another 1,000 trips to this particular area, it still doesn't rise to the level of other areas in the city that are far more congested. And that's important because you have to consider your transportation corridor, you have to consider your facilities, you have to consider the fact that Old 35 is an old state highway. And do we have to ensure safety and access points? Absolutely. But this is not a part of the city that shares the same level of traffic density as others that are major concerns. So just from a comparative perspective, I offer that for your consideration. With respect to access, it does appear when you've got this proposed access stacked with the DOT's access stacked with Meadowlark, you have 3 in relative proximity. And I see from Glenn's comments that there is a suggestion that the park and ride access be combined with this access. From our perspective, there's no issue with that. If it's in the best interest to eliminate the park and ride access, to utilize the access to this property to share it, and then to have the access to the park and ride Y-off, that's fine by us, because certainly we're concerned about safety as well, and we want to eliminate the number of accesses that are close in proximity. And so, you know, my point in sharing this information is that this isn't a developer that's trying to jam in a project just to get a project done. The project needs to make sense, and it needs to be safe. And so from that perspective, I think we have some solutions to offer. I know that we want to be part of the overall consideration in how we make traffic and safety a priority in this area. And you know, this development, it has to fit. But at the same time, as we've talked about in the city of Hudson, we also need more affordable housing. And when I say affordable, I mean market rate options. And one of the questions that's come up that I've received from the residents is, who are these people that are going to be living in this complex, and what does that look like? Well, you know, typically these are teachers, these are police officers, these are people that, you know, make with a household income of $40,000 to $90,000 a year, who don't have the means to buy a $300,000 house in the city of Hudson. But we want them to live in Hudson, we want them to have options in Hudson, and frankly, we need new facilities for that. And we don't have it currently. And we talk about it often, that it's been a long, long time since Hudson has actually seen a brand new apartment building built within the city. And in part, that's because parking restrictions have been challenging in the past. In part, you know, perhaps it wasn't a priority of developers, or it wasn't a need in the city. But we know now that it is a need in the city. And we have qualified housing in the city. We have income guideline housing in the city, but the challenge for a lot of people is that their household income is higher than those income restricted opportunities, but it's not high enough to be able to afford the median house in Hudson, which now is $300,000 or more. And so where do those folks live? Do they live in Hudson, or do they live in New Richmond or Baldwin or Hammond, or do they share space in Woodbury? And that's the question for this community. Where do these folks live? Do we want our teachers to live in our community? Do we want our police officers to work in our community? To live in our community? Do we want those who work here to be able to enjoy the community? And so you have developers that are here that are saying, this is a project that works. It's not entirely inconsistent with your comprehensive plan. When you made the decision to move from commercial to RM1, you decided that corner wasn't the best for commercial. And as we sit here today, I think everybody can understand that that's not a corner that would work for a commercial. It's probably one of the few things we all agree on here, is that spot is not one where you'd want a commercial development. But so how do you transition appropriately? How do you meet these housing goals? And how do you make more housing available at affordable rates where families can live to enjoy this community? The last thing I want to say is that on this site, we're not trying to sandwich a small or a large building on a small site. So as opposed to a lot of your developments, you have narrow setbacks, you have little green space, you have very tight development. This, by the very nature of how it sits and how this property is utilized, there's a 60-foot setback on the west, there's a 50-foot setback on the south, there's a 50-foot setback on the east. There are significant setbacks around this apartment complex. The apartment complex is set down low. This is a kind of a bowl type where the roads are up a little bit higher and the land actually sits down low. From the perspective of profile, from the perspective of green space, this is a development that's been designed to ensure that it fits with the character of the community. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop additional housing options that make sense with green space and with safety and access in mind. And so those are the priorities for these developers. Now, you know, these guys that are working through this project are the same developers that are developing the Lee property across from the dog track, and it's the same level, the same standard of development. They care about the community, they want to be here, they want to develop, and they want to do what's right by the citizens. And so, again, this is, from our perspective, we're trying to address all of the concerns, and I understand that having a piece of property that's undeveloped next to your housing development is challenging to think about what might go there next. But when we talk about need, and when we talk about what this community is in desperate need of at the moment, it is market rate apartment housing. And so our goal is to work with the city, to work with city staff, to address all of these concerns, and to ensure that we're proposing and moving forward with responsible development. And we'd ask you to consider that. What I'd like to come from this meeting is some relatively clear direction from this body to the Plan Commission to say, here are the items that we'd like you to address, so that the Plan Commission tomorrow, when it works through this, has your specific direction as to what you want to see in the plan coming back at your next meeting. Because I can tell you that this developer takes those comments to heart, will work through that direction, and will work with the Plan Commission and the council to ensure that you have a plan that makes sense. But the more direct comment and the more direction we can get from this body, I think it will make our discussion with the Plan Commission and our work with the city that much more effective. So I'm certainly happy to take any questions. My clients are here as well, but appreciate your time and consideration.
When you talk market rate, Nick, what kind of price per are you looking at?
So there will be efficiencies, and there will be 2 bedrooms. On the lower end, the price point is about $1,000, $1,000 or $1,100. On the higher end, $1,700.
Anybody else? We have a motion?
Well, I do have one more question for Mike. Do we know where we are with the park and ride?
No. Just talking with the state and got the feedback on, in terms of they are willing to sell it to us. The DOT is. I don't have a price. I've asked for a price. Have not received that yet. They would also be willing to work with the city on, changing access, reconfiguring. If a development were to occur on this property, they would be willing to work with us to ensure that access is safe and fully functional.
Gotcha. And the town of Hudson's feeling about Old 35?
We had discussions a couple months ago. I think that they're open to conversations, but we also have to bring them a proposal too, in terms of what it is that the city would like to see. So for different reasons, obviously, or a few different reasons, I'd like to, again, prompt the council to give the Plan Commission some direction in terms of what it is, the council would be looking for, because it is important. It helps frame the discussion tomorrow evening. There's a lot on their plate already, obviously, with the next issue that we're going to deal with tonight. Any feedback, any additional commentary is very welcome as we try to work through these.
I think that it would be wise to have something that would discourage traffic onto Meadowlark Lane if we cannot block it from that. Maybe some traffic calming measures to keep people driving slowly if they are driving through there, like the speed humps or something along that line.
We did utilize on the Lee property just a public safety access, and it's only that. It's not a through street at the end of in Summit Ridge.
The only emergency access would be allowed.
Okay, that would be good.
Yep.
And that would be the top preference.
Yep.
From a land perspective, going to RM2, do you think that is too much going into too small of a space? Or what is your feeling on that?
It's hard because we don't know exactly what a footprint would be. We have an idea, a basic concept of what they proposed.
Gotcha.
The applicant is correct that there are some significant setbacks from the highway. There are some significant setbacks from Hanley, as well as Old 35. Now, in terms of what those parking the access road would or wouldn't look like, it's hard to say. I mean, it fits within that zoning criteria. Now, did the comp plan contemplate that? No. So the comp plan did not. So the comp plan, obviously, which was amended from general commercial to medium density residential, we settled on a specific density as part of that district. So, I guess if you're looking at the 2009 comp plan, then no, it'd be more density than we had anticipated.
Mike, wouldn't it be fair to say we shouldn't act until we decide what we need to do with Old Highway 35 first? We can't do anything really until we know what we're going to do, annex it or whatnot.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly fair to say.
If we acquired that park and ride, would there be restrictions on that land that it would have to stay as a park and ride?
Yes, the DOT has indicated that if the city were to purchase that property, that would have to be used in perpetuity for transportation purposes in whole.
Okay.
So that was my first question okay, let's say we did purchase it. Does it all have to be a parking lot, or can we cut half of it off and develop a green space or a park or a buffer zone or something like that? And the response was no, it has to remain for transportation purposes into forever.
Well, it's a safety nuisance anyways. We should just buy it and be done with it, so we get rid of the riffraff that's out there. Period. And then go from there. Is it in the city limits?
No.
So that's another piece.
So the first piece would be to annex, and then obviously law enforcement would be through us as opposed to the sheriff, which would be consistent with Hudson Meadows. So it's kind of an island right now in and of itself.
Mike, could there be an access road from Hanley that would handle some of that traffic potentially?
Part of the challenge with that is some of that has some controls from the state.
Okay.
So, when anytime, and Glenn might have to correct me if I get too over my skis here, but anytime that you have an on-ramp onto a highway trying to push people out onto the spacing just isn't there from the cul-de-sac or the roundabout to the intersection.
Okay.
And plus that sits in a bowl, so it's hard to get up that. You're going up a hill to get to Hanley from the backside of that apartment building.
Okay.
The other thing and this should be relatively small, is there going to be some sort of pedestrian bicycle kid connection between the apartment buildings, apartment complex, and I would like to see a connection between the Meadowlark development and the apartment buildings, so we're not having to drive out onto the highway. The other thing is, I would challenge the assertion that most of the traffic is going to go to Hanley.
Okay.
I don't, I guess I would have to ask the residents, how many of you take, how many you go out Hanley to go to County Market, and how many you go the other way? That's what I'd do if I lived there.
Sure.
I wouldn't be going Hanley and then having to deal with, how many stoplights? So that'd be, I think we need to rethink that traffic pattern from that perspective.
Can you clarify for me, please? I heard you say it has to always be a park and ride lot, even if we own it, and then you said we should get rid of it altogether, but what was the answer to that?
Well, I say we buy and we just put some
So we could
just
clean it up.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Kill it, or just make it, I don't know what you would make out of it, but.
About a park?
Didn't I hear you say that it has to be
It has
transportation
to be
related forever?
used for transportation purposes forever.
I don't know
What does that mean?
I don't know what that would look like.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you had an
I'm
idea
trying
in mind.
My thought is take that element out of that whole thing, however we could do it, which would meet the requirement. And are they going to hold steadfast on that? It's hard to say. It's government.
Yeah.
Mike, could you find out what other transportation-related uses we could have for it rather than a park and ride?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great.
I would
Knowing our
think
options
something
would
like
be good.
just an example would be a transit, not that's what it would be, but, that would be a.
Yeah, well, they set up the
Some type of a
radius
bus
on the end of it
transit,
to
if we had a
accommodate.
bus or-
a bus of some sort. You can tell how they had it set up. You could do electric vehicle charging stations is something that we've seen interest in recently. You know, there's a number of different options. You know, I think there's importance in knowing, you know, if we were able to redesign that lot or do something, could we save a little bit of extra space, and would they be agreeable to that?
How much is it utilized as a park and ride?
After we inquired, they did a quick survey, and it was not much. I think they had 13 cars average
per day
recently. Yeah.
Pretty light.
Yep. So it really depends, you know.
Right. So I guess I'll move to recommend it back to Plan Commission with a keen eye on making the groundwork on Old 35 and making a decision point on the park and ride before rezoning.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
I think I've gotten some informal feedback that the town of Hudson may not be interested in turning that road over to the city. So that puts another wrinkle into what happens there. So that has to be part of the Highway 35. I guess you could figure that, but that's a critical piece.
All right. Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing on a zoning map amendment from AR Agricultural Residential to PRD3 Planned Residential Development at St. Croix County Tax Parcel 020-1085-30-000 Hearth Development LLC.
I'll give it a second.
Check maybe Braden, check maybe Braden. Kip, maybe check with Braden and see if you can. That's what they're saying. It might be a long thing to wait right now.
All right, Mike, if you would describe this piece of land again, this parcel.
All right, this one I think we're at least a little bit more familiar with in terms of the fact that it was annexed this past year. It's the 40 acres on the southwest corner of Vine and Carmichael. The applicant is desirous of developing the eastern quarter of the property more or less as general business, transitioning into two proposed multifamily pads. The council and the plan commission have seen their specimens, is what they're calling them, in terms of what these potentially may look like. Obviously, code 255-15, which sets up the PRD zoning designation. So they're proposing a planned residential district for the multifamily as well as the single family proposed. I think there's 43 lots on the west and south end, a proposed park parcel. A lot of, again, spirited discussion at Plan Commission about what should or shouldn't happen there. A lot of really good comments. Again, I think that's pretty much does anybody have any questions before we open the public hearing?
All right, so everybody know which parcel we're talking about for the public hearing? The same rules apply. Try to keep it to 3 minutes. Try not to repeat, and be respectful of everyone. And I've been asked if the council members could speak into their mics because people in the back of the room are having a hard time hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to comment on this? Again, identify yourself and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Erin Waleko, and I live at 2238 Ruby Road. My family has been in Hudson for many years. My grandfather, Gerald Wallace, was the Chief Deputy Sheriff of St. Croix County for 27 years, and my father, Mike Wallace, was the Building Inspector and Assessor for the City of Hudson for 35 years. Hudson has grown and changed tremendously with each generation. No one wants a development in their backyard, but the development of that wood property has been discussed for years, so it comes as no surprise. However, what is a surprise is the sheer size of the proposed development and the density desired to meet the financial cost. The area surrounding the property consists of 1 to 2 level commercial buildings, the YMCA, Faith Community Church, a government center, 4 schools within walking distance, and many residential homes. As others have brought up in previous meetings, the proposal does not fit with the surrounding neighborhood. Hudson continues to be a desirable place to live. It's a historical town with a close-knit community. Though it's changed over the years, it continues to have that small town feel. I understand there's a demand for more housing and market rate apartments, as mentioned with the other developments proposed tonight, so that others can enjoy living here as much as we all do. But we need to consider if this is the right design for this particular location. Yes, there are multi-level buildings already in Hudson. The new senior living by the hospital fits well there. It's nested within the bluffs. But 2 5-story buildings plopped into an existing neighborhood that's already just 1 and 2 level buildings, frankly, would be an eyesore. I understand that the developer is simply following the city's guidelines for the proposed zoning, but he's also trying to build something that fits our city's needs with the housing. But that's just it. It's our city. We have the opportunity to keep the Rivertown charm and the friendly neighborhood feel. So I want you to consider, does the need for multifamily living outweigh our desire to protect our Hudson aesthetic? I ask that you consider this and deny the request for the zoning change. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Jen Harriet, 621 Diamond Drive. I was at the Plan Commission meeting, so a lot of what you said is what we've already discussed. There's a couple of things, though. Traffic on Vine Street. I live right on the corner of Vine and Diamond. I am directly impacted by the traffic that goes up and down Vine. Every morning during the school season, there are high schoolers cutting on Diamond Drive to cut through our neighborhood to get to Grandview. And I know it was mentioned with the other development, which is 152 units, it was an estimated 1,000 cars added. I know I read in the Plan Commission agenda that it was estimated only 60 cars added to Vine Street from these 263 units. I'm not sure how that math equates, but even 1 car per additional unit you would think would add at least 263 vehicles to Vine Street, not including the commercial employees. Another thing I wanted to bring up is regarding mixed-use developments. I read something actually that I thought summarized it well. It said, mixed-use developments command careful planning and creativity. There should be a market analysis. It should be essential, but projects should also fit within their prospective communities. I don't feel that this fits within the area at all. Even a 4-story building, which I believe I also read that they reduced the 5-story to a 4-story. So 2 4-story buildings would still be exceedingly tall for that area. At 60 feet tall, they would be the tallest buildings, I believe, on this side of the highway. The closest is the Holiday Inn Express at 59 feet. I know I can't imagine 2 Holiday Inns sitting on the corner of Vine and Diamond amongst the neighborhood feel. I also live, obviously, where the crosswalk is, where you get to the YMCA, and it is extremely dangerous. They added the flashing lights that people can, most people don't slow down or stop. You have to wait a long time. My daughter's gonna be a freshman, which means she can't drive yet. And our whole neighborhood is not in the busing area, so she will be walking, and it's scary. It's not safe. And my request would be that that there is a lot more planning and consideration before this gets passed. I would like to see the building height reduced to 2 stories, which is what every other building commercially in the area is. And I would like to see the traffic on Vine Street addressed first, not after. One other thing I brought is something I came across today called HAC. It's High Intensity Activated Crosswalk. I would like to see that go on Diamond and Vine, which it seems to be a more safe way to manage that crosswalk for people, and especially all the kids that are going back and forth. So I would like to see that included or looked into. That's
Say
all I
that
have.
again. What? I'm sorry.
It's called,
Can we pass that around?
sure. It's called Hawk. And so what it is that it has 2 lights on the top and 1 on the bottom, and a person activates it, and what it does is it flashes a yellow light first, warning cars that are coming to slow down, and then eventually the yellow light gets solid, and 2 red lights go solid, and a timer counts down. So people can, they have 10 seconds or whatever the timer is set to walk across while traffic stops, and then the timer blinks. The red lights blink to tell traffic that, now you can yield, kind of acting like a stop sign, and then it goes away, and then traffic continues. So I know that Vine Street is kind of a nightmare to cross. It's very dangerous, and traffic backs up all the way to Carmichael during the school year, so that's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, David Robson. I live at 1274 Highway 35 in St. Joe Township, but I also own a substantial amount of property in the city of Hudson that most of you probably know. There's been a number of 60-foot buildings built in the city of Hudson already, one of which is the Holiday Inn Express, which backs up to a residential neighborhood. And another one is the Hampton Inn. I think a third one is the Fairfield Inn, but the Hampton Inn also is in the Banterra development, which I'm a partner in, and I happen to be a partner in that specific hotel. And it also is right, the people above, up on Carriage Hills or whatever it's called, look down on the hotel. So there's also some houses back behind the development that are within a half a block of the hotel. And one thing I'd like to point out about these specific buildings is commonly when you're developing property, which I've done, the buildings are above the road level, and this particular development, the buildings are going to be at or below the road level, so the buildings won't appear as tall. And so that's going to help it fit back into the neighborhood. And this is a 40-acre parcel. That Hampton Inn sits on a 22-acre parcel. And it's 60 feet tall, okay, or 59 feet tall. It had to be under 60 feet. So that's one of the things I'd like to point out. The other thing I'd like to point out is that this project will substantially increase the tax base of the city of Hudson. And as a taxpayer in the city of Hudson, that's important to me because as the tax base grows, the mill rate goes down or gives the city more revenue to improve infrastructure. And I know that this specific developer is being asked to support $1.5 million or $2 million worth of off-site improvements to improve sewer and water, stormwater, roads on Carmichael and Vine, and I think the Carmichael and Vine intersection. So they're being asked to do a lot of things, and part of what they need to do to be able to support this extra cost that they have to pay off-site is they have to have more density so that they can make the project work financially. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Donna Rail. I'm from 2234 Ruby Road. I'll just start with one of my concerns being, again, with the traffic. I'm sure that you've probably heard this over and over again, but I just don't think it can be said enough. Vine and Carmichael are as busy as they get already. They're maxed out. Anyone that has to access those roads in the mornings or after school, getting kids to high school, to the middle school, any of the elementary schools, the YMCA, knows that it gets backed up, and then if you can imagine adding in another 400, potentially 400 vehicles on top of that, plus whatever the commercial lots are bringing in for traffic. So the developer has added in additional lanes, which help mitigate the traffic coming into the development. But there's still nothing that helps mitigate the traffic exiting the development. There's still one lane on each on Vine and Carmichael. There's 2 exits, and it's really not going to be feasible for anybody to make a left turn going out. So the alternative will be to make the right turn and go around if you have to get to the high school or onto Vine, coming up Grandview, adding additional traffic onto Grandview and backups on Grandview as well to get back out to Vine if you're heading that way. The density of it is just adding so much more traffic into an area that's already taxed out to what it can hold. And then the density going along with the height, that is 5 stories, 4 to 5 stories. It doesn't fit really with anything else in the area. They're all 1 to 2 stories high in that area. And the commercial, another thing with the commercial lots in the apartment buildings, the first level of commercial, there's commercial along Carmichael, but just something to think about is the commercial lots that are on the bottom. Also, they're going to be new developments. They're large commercial lots. So they're not really designed for the small business owner that's got a unique purpose and trying to build their business. They're not going to be able to afford things like that. So what we're attracting or bringing in are chain businesses or chain things in the commercial lots, and not really promoting any kind of local businesses or local small town owners. That's about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Chip Ross. I'm at 2228 Jody Circle. I'm a little late to the game here. The biggest thing that I think I have a concern with is where the sanitation and storm sewer and those kinds of things, facilities are going to hook into the City of Hudson infrastructure. As far as I know, the end of the sewer ends right in the cul-de-sac in front of my house. And it wasn't done right in the first place back there, so trying to hook something else into that causes me a lot of concern. Just want to make sure the drainage stays the same. My basement's dry. I wanted to keep it that way. Those are the things that I think scare me the most about this thing, is where is all that going to go? It's got to go back down to the river somehow, right? Somehow it's got to get from there down to the sanitation facilities, the treatment plants, those kinds of things. What's that going to do to water pressures and those kinds of things? The infrastructure scares me the most about this, especially with putting that amount of density in that area. I think it really needs to be looked at very, very, very carefully before any decision like that is made. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor and members of this council. My name is Mike Pezzavento, and I live at 1704 Stone Pine Bay. My wife handed me this flyer about 2 hours ago. Said, Mike, this is not good. I have 3 daughters, Sophia, Chloe, and Grace, and they go to the middle school, and they'll be going to the middle school, and they're going to have to cross Vine every morning, and there's no real crosswalk there. So before you make your decision, think about my daughters and the safety of children, because there are 3 schools within the area. There's EP Rocks, not far away, the high school, and of course the middle school at Carmichael. And you know, everybody wants progress to stop the day after they move here. I moved here 10 years ago, and I don't want progress to stop, but this is simply out of character. If you look at the YMCA and the homes across from the YMCA and in my development, Stone Pine Bay, they're all, for the most part, single-family homes. There should be areas for apartments. This is far too close and too dangerous, and I think it's out of character with the remaining structures, at least south of that proposed development. I would ask you to deny the proposed redevelopment, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Haywood at 2236 Ruby Road. I echo the concern about the water as well, but I'm going to keep mine tonight to the point of what's the rush. So we have a comprehensive plan set to be finalized in August of 2020, I think. Hopefully a lot of public shares their information and shares their support for it. But I think it just comes down to why are we rushing into this development when there are so many unanswered questions. I've sat with Jim several times. I've sat with Nick and Greg, the developer. I've sat with Mike. It just seems like we're rushing into something where, you know, Jim has come to my house and we saw a development that was kind of rushed and put together, and there's several problems. The stormwater drainage at the front of Jody Circle, my backyard. So I guess what I want to stress is rushing this project without assessing the feasibility. Do we have a need for apartments? Do we have a need for this commercial? I see plenty of real estate open. I know Carmichael Ridge is not completely sold out. So my concern is that we're rushing into this development for, kind of the wrong reason. So maybe we can just take a deep breath, reassess where we're at, answer everything, Vine, Carmichael, density, what we want Hudson to look like. Do we want, just what we want there before, it gets developed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. Marion Weber, 604 Grandview Drive. I have a number of concerns about this. One is the height of the buildings. And it seems to me like maybe when the developers come in here, they ask for more than they think they're ever going to get just to see how much they can get. And I hope that's the case in this situation. But there is a very serious issue with Carmichael Road. There's a serious issue with safety as far as people, and there has been for years, people traveling on foot and bicycle to cross Carmichael Road and Vine Street. There are potential ways to solve some of those problems, but before this development moves forward and adds to the problems as far as Vine Street and Carmichael Road are concerned, and the safety is concerned, and before we resolve what we want Hudson to look like going into the future as far as building height and building usage, and what's the feasibility of having in a housing development apartments with retail flow that runs the high risk, from what I've seen as far as those kinds of operations are concerned, of being vacant quite a bit of the time. And I think before we move forward with any of this, that we really need to fix Carmichael Road and that Carmichael Road Vine Street interchange so that it's able to support that development as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments?
Nancy Stennett and I live at 2232 Ruby Road, and I have, of course, great concern, and I think I see a consistency going on with the council tonight. I see three things on the agenda. That's high density, and I called the city today and asked what high density was, what a PDR 1 and a PDR 2 and a PDR 3 was. I was amazed at how many people can go into 1 acre of land. And so, yep, you can put a 5 acre or a 5-story apartment, 2 5-story apartments in that land. As we've all said, it's just so substantially dense. I had a chance of talking to a couple of the older people before I came here tonight this week and tried to say, gosh, what do you see? What's your thought? What's behind all these high densities now in Hudson? Great podcast. It's kind of nice that that trying to figure out how to balance a small city and get the streets fixed. And I guess the way I look at it, there's always another Fillmore and 5 other streets that needs to be fixed, and that's how you get your money. But is it really prudent to do it at the expense of a neighborhood and your community? Our neighborhood has come together, as it looks like the other neighborhoods are, because we are a community. And what we're asking you to do is not to do this high-density housing there. Yep, they talk about it being higher and lower, and I agree there are houses on the top of that hill that I guess if you go to the end of their property and look over, you might see the top of the hotel, but it's not in their neighborhood, and I think that's different. And it is, the Hampton Inn is where there is commercial and high commercial kind of things. I think this is different. This is a neighborhood of 2 stories. It's a business of 1 story. I tried to figure out where Hudson's going and why. I don't see a mission statement. I don't have a clue of what your plan is and what your compass is to find that plan. You know, maybe that's part of your comprehensive plan as well, that I would ask you to actually just to partner with our neighborhood, and if there's some way that we could come together and have a community and that we all can be happy and proud of, that we are, that you stay within the tradition of Hudson. I do hear comments about we don't want it to be a Woodbury or a Stillwater, but I'll say that a couple times I've been over there, I don't see 5-story apartment buildings in the middle of neighborhoods over there. So I would ask you to please hold this and to rethink about it and not to rush into it. I don't think I'll ever be happy with something higher than a PDR2 in that area, because I think residential is fabulous. I think having appropriate apartments for our teachers and our police officers. I had a chance to talk to the police officer here tonight for a few minutes, ask him where he lives. You know, he lives in Hudson, but his two brothers don't, who are police officers in Hudson, because they can't afford it. They live over in Woodbury. That's $1,800 they pay for rent over there for their apartment. You know, but when I was young too, gosh, I remember my husband just got out of grad school and I was a nurse and we couldn't afford a house either. I think that's pretty realistic. Hudson is a high-scale, an upscale town. It is a little more expensive than living in Hammond and New Richmond. It is. We are more expensive here. That's part of the deal, you know? So I will ask you to, I think you need to have the right land. I think you need to have the right time. I think you need to have the right structure, and you need to have the right infrastructure. Not only the roads, but we need police officers, and we need EMS, and we need nurses and teachers, and all the things that's going to support that also. And as you put a higher density, that all too also adds on to the budget kind of thing. I think it's a tough place to be, to run a city and to balance all those things. But gosh, what I really ask you all to do is just to be good stewards of the land, to be good stewards of our design, and really to show the wisdom that you have time and time again in your decisions about Hudson. You have good wisdom, and you worry about the community, and I think have our best interest at heart. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comment?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With my hat in my hand, I apologize for being a little vocal at our planning meeting. I was Bob Atwood, by the way. I'm the trustee for the property. I was a little emotional on the planning. I was surprised and taken back by the people that decided that our property should be limited by what they want. So I started thinking about what they were saying and how they didn't want things to change and how things have changed. And I started thinking back, let's see, I've been there for, our property's been a family for 64 years. Can anybody remember Vine Street being Highway 12? A few of us. I can remember riding you know what Carmichael Road was, a gravel road? I rode bike from that farm downtown. That's how I got there. And most people don't remember that. Has Hudson changed? Tremendously. And it's not because we sat there and procrastinated. My mom passed away 5 years ago. She's in a rest home 3 years before that. I've been working on this thing for 8 years, working with different developers, trying to get different ideas, whatnot. It's not been procrastinating. It's just been working through this thing, trying to get the ideal piece of property going with the ideal situation. And Greg has been, in my mind, amazing to work with. But anyway, I had a few notes here. One of the things you talked about, I heard some of the people complain about drainage in there because of where their housing is and whatnot, how the property is going to be graded. Greg has been visiting with these people, suggesting that he'd help that situation out. He didn't develop that property. I think it was it Hans Hagen Homes? Because that property across the driveway from where my mom lived used to be higher than where that house was, and now it's below that grade. So somewhere along they graded that thing, but Greg has been willing, I guess, to work with them to try to help with that situation. So I think he's a wonderful developer. He said, like we went through the street thing. We talked about that last time. I guess I don't know anything. I guess those are the things I want to hit on. I guess emotionally, it's been very draining on me. It's been 8 years worth of, excuse my French, a hell of a lot of work, a hell of a lot of time. And we're trying to get development in there that seems to work with the community, and I think it'll help the whole situation along any way it can. So I hope you approve it, Yeah, and I know Greg has been working very hard with Mike and the rest of you trying to get things going, so my apology goes to you, Mike, too. So anyway, I think that's all I have right now. Any questions that I could help with, or? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Rod Clark, 2060 Bridal Court, Carmichael Ridge. And in my opinion, Carmichael between Cooley and Vine is already maxed out on traffic. On the morning drive time, evening drive time, I have to come out Hillcrest by the Culvers and the where the new hotel will be, but it's not possible to make a left turn now out of Hillcrest, and it's a little difficult to go right. And that's our access, and the other access, or that road goes all the way out to Cooley, and that's our only road into Carmichael Ridge. And if you put, I think if you put any more vehicles on Carmichael, they going south, if there's a backup there, they're going to want to go through Carmichael Ridge. That's going to be the shortcut that goes through there. And we certainly don't need any more traffic through a residential that community there. So it would seem to me that Carmichael needs to be improved before any additional development is done along Carmichael in that stretch. The intersection at Carmichael and Vine, probably everyone knows that needs major renovation, and like someone else said, I think you should take care of the rebuilding the infrastructure of that road before you do any more development at all. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments?
Move to close public hearing.
Got a
Second.
motion to close, motion second to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion of possible action on preliminary development plans and a zoning map amendment from AR Agricultural Residential to PRD-3 Planned Residential Development at St. Croix County Tax Parcel 020-1085-30-000, the Hearth Development LLC. Same thing, we're not looking for any particular up or down vote on this development project. We are looking for direction for the Plan Commission for tomorrow night. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we refer this back to the Planning Committee per their recommendations, and that we ask them to focus on resolving the traffic issue of Carmichael and Vine, not just the intersection, not just the traffic in and out, but of the Carmichael-Vine corridor. And that we also take a stronger look at pedestrian and bicycle traffic, because we're just going to exacerbate the situation. There's nothing that we're going to create. We're going to put now 250 units on the south, on the south side of Vine, and there is no way to get west to the YMCA or the high school from there. So we really have to take a look at that further than we have to be going down to Grandview. Is
that all
perhaps.
part of the motion, Jim?
Yeah.
Jen's having a hard time.
Okay, Jen, sorry about that. So, yeah, we need, and to address the pedestrian and traffic safety and forget the rest of the stuff. We'll talk about that later.
All right, we got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing on the zoning map amendment from AR Agricultural Residential to PRD-3 Planned Residential Development and B2 General Business at St. Croix County Tax Parcel 020-1085-20-000 Hearth Development LLC. Mike, you want to explain this one?
Same project.
Just exactly, the same project, just explain the
There's
difference between
there's
the
two
parcels.
parcels, right? So there was the parcel with the old homestead on it, and the remaining parcel which was farmed. So this is the larger of the two, I believe. Yes. So all part of the same proposed development, just, again, two parcels.
Everybody understand that? So the public, everybody understand that?
It's the same project, just
Same project, so it's the 40 acres. There's two existing parcels on.
don't talk, are we have to talk about this one?
No,
You
no.
you absolutely can talk about this too, but the point is you really don't have to because it's the same project.
Yeah.
But if you feel compelled. All right, everybody here understand that? It is a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment?
It's 2232 Ruby Road. You know what? My concern is decreasing property values, not only immediately to Vine Hills, but I think all the way down to the high school, because those will be the main access roads. So I think that will just impact two five-story buildings will impact negatively on our property values, and I'd like to keep it to a PDR2 status and single-family residential with your residential retail that they've kind of proposed on your zoning map. Thank you.
Well, that certainly was something that wasn't repetitive. Any other comment? Any other comment? Any other comment?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion and possible action on preliminary development plans and a zoning map amendment from AR Agricultural Residential to PRD-3 Planned Residential Development and B2 General Business at St. Croix County Tax Parcel 020-1085-20-000 Hearth Development LLC. Again, not looking to take action. What we are looking for is recommendation for the Plan Commission. Is there a motion?
I have another motion, and it should have been my first one, but that we recommend that we ask them to look very strongly at the height and to reject the 60-foot limit and bring it back and be looking at being in character with the rest of the development.
Motion, is there a second?
I would second that.
Got a motion, a second discussion?
Mr. Mayor, can I make some comments?
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, Nick Bivy and I represent this project, and Greg Johnson is here as well from Hearth. A couple of comments that I want to offer. You know, first, there's a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about what should Hudson look like, and I think your staff did a phenomenal job in their staff report to trace back the history of this property to say what has it been planned for. Go back to 1993 when the city identified this property as medium density housing. Fast forward to 2009, fast forward to your current comprehensive plan, commercial, medium density, and single family. All these developers, whether it's been Greg or anybody else throughout the course of history working on this property, have tried to do is put together plans that match your planning. And so when folks say we don't see a mission statement, we don't see what the plan is for the future, the plan is your comprehensive plan. That's the rule book that we're following. That's the game that we're trying to play here, and the rules that we're trying to follow in order to put together a development plan that at least gains consideration from this council. Secondarily, we look to your zoning code to say, within your comp plan, what can we do? What are the rules? What are the heights? What are the densities? How does it all work, and how does it fit together? And so as we approach this, we'd like some very clear direction to the Plan Commission for tomorrow night to say, if you don't like 4 stories, if you don't like 60 feet, what do you as a body prefer? Because I can tell you that the Plan Commission struggled with that same exact question. I can tell you that your comp plan provides a particular density for this property. Now, could we come up with other less desirable scenarios for the development of this property to achieve the density that your comp plan allows for? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's not our preference. Our preference is to put forward a development plan which matches your comp plan, which accomplishes the goals that staff has set out in their report, and that really tries to provide that consistency with that plan and with that vision that this city has had, frankly, for the last 25 or 30 years, while also matching the goals of having affordable housing and having apartments and the like. And so, while it may be desirable for buildings in Hudson to be no more than 30 feet in height or 40 feet in height, the reality is that when this property came in, when it was annexed in by the City Council, it was annexed in subject to the plan that you approved previously in your comprehensive plan. And that's what these developers are trying to do. Secondarily, let's talk about traffic. Because with everybody that we talk to, whether it be residents or council members or Plan Commission members, the question is traffic and how do we address traffic. The only thing that we can rely on are your experts. Your experts, your staff has told us that with the improvements, the $1.5 million that the city is requiring us to pay as part of this development, that those improvements will sufficiently address traffic. Now, you can agree or disagree, but those aren't requirements that we're creating. They're not plans that we're creating. They're plans that the city is creating. And so when the city says we need turn lanes, we need wider lanes, we need a signal on Carmichael to slow traffic, those aren't our solutions. Those are the city's solutions. And so the developer has come in and has said, we're willing to play by your rules. We're willing to adopt the capital cost study, and we're willing to make those improvements. And that comes at a significant cost. That comes at almost $2 million in investment in infrastructure exterior to this 40-acre site. And so that's before we put in interior roads or interior water service or anything of that nature. Those are improvements that get made to city streets and to city infrastructure. And so our goal, again, is to work with the city to say, what would you like to see? Because in order for any developer to fund $2 million in exterior improvements, there has to be a financial model, a financial plan, a feasible development which allows a developer to invest in that infrastructure. And please don't mistake what I'm saying. We want to be part of the solution. A development that doesn't address Vine, a development that doesn't address Carmichael is a bad development for the developer, and it's a bad development. It's a bad development for the city. And so we're all in on being part of the solution. The question is, what do we need in terms of density to make the project financially feasible to meet the city's requirements? We're not proposing anything different than the comp plan on the commercial side. We're not proposing anything different, single family, on that side. We're proposing some density, which the city comp plan envisions, expects, and anticipates. And I think the question is, hopefully, what form will that take, and how do we get to the point where we can develop 40 acres in a way that allows development to actually happen? And so I think our goals are common on this one. I think we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. But to say out of course that buildings can't be higher than X, well, that's going to be a real challenge for anybody. Hearth, Greg, any developer that comes in where the requirement is $2 million in infrastructure costs. And so if the city wants to contribute to that piece of it, so that it's not as expensive for the developer, or it's not as high an investment for the developer to come in and actually develop this parcel, we're certainly open to those plans and those prospects. But the concept here is that the developer will agree, will take on those obligations. And in exchange, we're not asking for a variance. We're not asking for any deviations. We've agreed, after hearing from the Plan Commission, to reduce our northern building from 70 feet to 60 feet so that we have two 60-foot buildings well within your 75-foot limit, to reduce density in those apartment buildings from 120 down to 110 so that we're decreasing the density so it strictly complies with your comprehensive plan. We're willing to try to comply in every way without asking for a variance, without asking for any deviation from your plan or from your code to develop this parcel. But at the end of the day, there has to be some recognition that there's a heavy burden to even get into this development, whether it's Greg, Harth, or anybody else. And that's the challenge. And so, you know, if the point is Plan Commission, make some decisions, make a good solid recommendation and send it back to the council, I'd ask that you provide the Plan Commission with very clear direction, so when you get a recommendation back, hopefully it is consistent with what you'd like to see. Because all we want to know, all we want to understand is what the rules are moving forward. And I guarantee we'll work as hard as we can to try to meet those. But, you know, bear in mind that our plan needs to be viable, it needs to be feasible, and it just doesn't, it's not just Greg saying this. I mean, this is every developer that could imagine developing 40 acres at that site. And that's the reality. And so I'd ask you to think back to 1993, think back to 2009. What we're proposing is entirely consistent with the thinking of the city over the course of the last 30 years. And so if you would, again, I'd simply ask that you direct the Plan Commission appropriately so we can go to work and hopefully we can put forth a proposal that garners your consideration so that we can move this process forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Actually, I'm sorry, may I interrupt?
Sure.
Clerk, can you read back the motion, please?
I didn't get the entire part. I was going to have to listen to the tape. Recommended that, well, I can read you a portion of it. Recommended that we look at the height, the Plan Commission look at the height, reject anything over 60 feet, limit it to character with the rest of the development, to have it in character in line, something to that effect.
I think it was reject the 60-foot
right.
request.
So if it's over 60 feet, yeah.
And then look at keeping it the height in character with the area.
Okay.
And I would make a comment. I keep hearing about what it was back in 1993 or 83 or 2000 or whatever it was. But if we'd had the foresight, Vine would be 20 feet wider. Carmichael wouldn't. We would be 4 lanes. You know, now we're trying to fix things. So we're trying to look ahead and say, let's not recreate that, not make it worse. No, it's great that our staff has been able to work with you and say, okay, you have to deal with the added traffic right at your entrances and exits. That's basically what's been done, is manage the traffic in and out of that development. It has done nothing to manage the traffic on Carmichael all the way to 94, or Vine Street to the high school, or Carmichael to the middle school. So those are issues. Those are really city issues. Fixing the rest of that. So that's why I think, and we have a plan. We've been looking at what are we going to do with Carmichael. We did a study to try to figure out how to address Carmichael. But now it's time that we have to step up and do that. We can't allow another 2,000 to 3,000 trips into that area, in and out of that area, and that's what the numbers come out. You got 2,000 trips just for the residents, and then you want to put commercial in there. That's 500. How many thousand? 2,000 trips. So we can't handle that on those streets. So it just has to become part of that part of that plan. And the changes you guys have made are good. You know, that's going to help that. But it's going to help, it's going to eliminate accidents getting in and out, some of the accidents getting out. It does nothing for left turns onto Vine Street, which there will be left turns onto Vine Street. What's down the street? The YMCA and the high school, downtown. People are not going to go make right turns and go all the way to Cooley and go down. That's not going to happen. So we have not, the plan just doesn't address the traffic flow. And we can imagine all the counts, well, because people don't want to make a left turn, they're going to make the left turn. So that's just doesn't make sense to not think about that. So we have to really examine that whole piece. And it's not entirely the development's responsibility.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Say, my name's Greg Johnson. I am with Hearth Development, and I can appreciate the traffic and understand the concern there. I also will stand before you, as I did the Planning Commission, and say we were before you here in February with the same plan. Maybe the height was different, but the density and the code and whatnot that Nick has referred to hasn't changed. We're not asking for additional units from what your comp plan had talked about. And I'm very curious, when we came in February and there was absolutely no discussion about this matter, and we turned around and wrote a big check to the city for assessments that had been assessed and held by the city until that point. This would have been a wonderful conversation to have prior to that time. And we're really, really open and willing and want to help that situation. You know, this development as it's proposed is probably a $60 to $70 million all-in project once it's fully developed, which only can increase the tax base and help with a lot of the infrastructure problems we're talking about, which is Vine and Carmichael. And so I really hope you guys can take that into account when we talk about the density. The other issue I want to just address is this Woodbury feel and this, we're losing the feel of Hudson. You know, there's other developments that could potentially come in here, meet the density, and be two-story, but I don't know that you guys want that. A full project of attached townhomes, 2 stories. I don't know that necessarily fits the complexion and the look of Hudson either. You know, what's proposed, whether it's 3 stories or 4 stories, there's a ton of open space on this property. And aesthetically looking, it's beautiful. I mean, you have walking paths in here, you've got a pond with fountains, so I appreciate you giving me the time to talk here, but I really have a problem that we are here in February and that this was not even on the radar. And again, you know, if we can, we're going to work with you and try to get something that looks good and do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Greg, that's not a way to get my vote, to tell me that I made a mistake back in February. So I don't remember seeing the plan in this detail. We did not talk about buildings that were 75 feet high. We talk, when we're talking about annexing land, we're not talking about what's going to be there. You know, we have a general comp plan, what that's going to be there, but we weren't talking about this development that I see now.
We haven't changed the development since February, so I'll agree to disagree. We do want to work with you, and we do want to have a nice project that works. So, thank you.
The one comment that I wanted to address, and this is it's a challenge for us when we talk about traffic, and the city has obviously engaged its own traffic engineer, who has served as a traffic engineer for 54 years, and who we're required to utilize for the analysis, or at least to rely for the analysis. I was thrilled with the level of detail in the staff report regarding traffic, because it's a constant concern, particularly in that area. And I trust Glenn's opinion when he says that the improvements that are required, including lane widening, including new turn lanes, including signals, will control the traffic. Now, I understand that it's not going to fix everything. You know, I understand that we have a high school right down the road, and we have a busy YMCA, and we have other issues that need to be addressed. I've also been in situations with other developments where we provide our own traffic studies, and the conversation at the council table is, I don't trust traffic studies. That's okay. I understand. When you're sitting in your car and you're trying to make a left turn and it's difficult, you don't trust traffic studies. I get that. And so we're in a challenging position, right? Because on the one hand, we're relying on the city's engineer, one who we're not paying, to provide an opinion that says that your investment will control traffic sufficiently. On the other hand, there's a feeling that this is a busy area and that there's more that needs to be done. And I don't disagree with that. But I also don't think that we can simply table a development because there's more that needs to be done in the corridor. Exit 2 needs to be done. Carmichael north to south needs to be done. But you've studied these corridors for decades. You know what the traffic counts are. You know what the physical counts are. And so I appreciate the direction back to the Plan Commission to say, study this. This is important. I will tell you that the city has studied it, that the city has commissioned its engineer to provide you with an objective recommendation, and he has provided that. And I can also tell you that if we engaged our own traffic engineer that said something different, we'd probably be having a conversation about how traffic studies don't matter. And so, you know, when we look at it, it is a matter of feel. It is a matter of how do these corridors work together. I can tell you that the investment in the transportation corridor will make a difference. I can tell you that people won't be jumping the fog line to get into a shortened right turn lane from Vine to Carmichael. I can tell you that a signal on Carmichael will help slow traffic, and that there will be a calming effect. So there will be positive impacts. But the question is, do you believe your traffic engineer? The question is, you know, how do we deal with this entire corridor without holding the development to a different standard? The city fundamentally changed when Heritage Greens came in, when Red Cedar Canyon came in, when Carmichael Ridge came in. There's no question about that. And we have to deal with all these corridors and the traffic. But the city has for a long time envisioned this 40 acres in with a particular plan. And so hopefully we can work through those issues, and hopefully we can come to some agreement as to what those traffic improvements will actually do and how they will help this corridor. Because my fear is this development doesn't happen and $1.5 million in investments don't get made. We're going to have more traffic in that area because Hudson continues to grow and because Hudson is a center of commerce here in St. Croix County. And so you're going to have to deal with the issue in one form or another. And you can either do it cooperatively with a developer that's willing to contribute, or you'll have to find another solution that doesn't involve the development on that corner. And it's our perspective that we'd really like to do it cooperatively and help that situation. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, and hopefully we can continue to have that dialogue with the Plan Commission tomorrow night.
Nick, can I ask from the developer viewpoint, because I agree that we need affordable apartments. I agree with that's a need. I also agree with a lot of the folks here who've kind of testified tonight that, you know, the 5 stories is probably not a good fit for the neighborhood. So what I'm trying to figure out is a possible kind of compromise. I mean, from a developer standpoint, what would it do to have a 3-story, you know, the same type of plan, but at 3 stories as opposed to 5? What does that do for the economics of your projects?
Well, I'm going to let Greg answer that question, and we'll share these visuals with the Plan Commission tomorrow. But we also had some overhead photos taken to show you, to give you a visual of what it looks like and what the view is from 60 feet from where the apartments will be. Because I think there's a misnomer about the fact that these buildings are going to go up and everybody's going to see them, and it's going to change the character. So I'll pass these out, and I'll let Greg comment, and then I'll tell you what we've got here.
Thank you. Greg Johnson again. Yeah, you know, as far as a 5-story or a 4-story or a 3-story, you know, certainly as we get shorter, buildings get longer, open space becomes less, and I guess that's a discussion that we're willing to have, you know, with the Planning Commission and the Council. We've already looked to take the north building down to 60 feet, assuming that, you know, 60 feet, there's several 60-foot buildings in the community already. So we were willing to look at that. As far as going to a 3-story, maybe the buildings need to get a little bit longer and maybe we lose some of that open space. And if that's a trade-off that makes everybody feel more comfortable, we're willing to look at that. Again, as Nick said, we're not looking to try to increase density that wasn't kind of allotted for or looked at when you guys ran through your plans. So we're willing to look at that.
Thanks.
To answer your question. Yeah.
So, but to be fair, are you saying that there needs to be, is there a certain number of units that in your mind you say we need the X number of units to make this work from the development standpoint?
Sure, and I think the density that we are at now, which is we reduced the number from our previous application. Where we're at is really kind of a number that works in the financial model, fits within the comp plan that you guys had designated, and that's kind of the number. And you know, we had at Planning Commission talked about, is there any desire or interest to look at TIF? That's not something that we've asked for. We're trying to, you know, consume all of this expense in the project, and by doing that, there's a certain ratio that needs to be met. So we're open to discussion. You know, if TIF was something that the city was interested in exploring, you know, densities certainly can go down if there's some offsetting factors there.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
So in terms of what you have here, what we wanted to show, a couple of things. Tree line, number one. So on the western edge of the property, there's a significant tree line. Those trees are all on the neighboring property. So none of those trees come out. All those trees stay. We do additional berming and we plant additional trees. So you'll see the first 5 photos, 6 photos, run the property line to show you exactly what the tree line looks like today. It's very thick. It's thicker than I'd imagined, and I've driven by there several times. And it provides coverage for the homes all the way up to Vine Street. You'll notice that there are a couple of homes, it's like 1 or 2 in particular, as we move on in the slides, that will be able to see the apartment buildings. We're doing berming, we're adding trees, there will be additional buffering and screening, but out of that entire line of homes, we can see 1 or 2 in the photos that have a clear shot. Now, remember, there will be a row of homes around the exterior, there will be a road, there will be another row of homes before we even see the apartment buildings. And so it's important to look at this because when you look at a farm field that is undeveloped and you think you're going to build 4 stories, the neighbors are going to have nothing to look at but walls. That's not the case. It's not the case with this site. When you look at then the following photos, we've positioned the drone at 60 feet high, so the top of our proposed buildings, looking west so you can see exactly what you'll see. And again, you know, notice that you can see the backs of a couple of homes. There's one home in particular that has a tree in it, or a tree situated in front of it, but perhaps bedroom windows or back kitchen windows will see out. But again, there will be additional berming and planting. Aside from that home, all of the rest of the homes, as they exist today, and as these pictures were shot within the last couple of days, are screened. And so part of what you look at when you develop your comp plan is how do you transition housing? How do you transition from your commercial corridor on Carmichael into a higher density, which is the goal of that Carmichael corridor, into single-family homes, and then into this neighborhood? Well, this neighborhood is a 40 away from Carmichael, will be protected by a heavily wooded tree line, which is owned by those property owners, will be protected by berming and screening, will be protected by 2 additional rows of homes before you even get to the apartment buildings. Now, the way the site plan lays out, We're not laying the apartment buildings north to south so that the homeowners look out their backyards and see the entire face of each apartment building. The apartment buildings are running east to west, and so the only thing that the homeowners will see is the end of each of those apartment buildings. To the extent that they can see through their tree lines and see through the house and the next house and the screening and the berming, that's what they'll see. And so when we talk about how the character of the community is going to change, the character of the community is not going to change for that neighborhood. Now, I understand that you have concerns about traffic and you have concerns about pedestrian sheds and bike sheds and all of that. And we need to make sure that we're meeting the goals of your comp plan, that we're meeting the goals of this particular district. Keep in mind that in this particular district, as outlined in the staff report, the intention and the goal was to create more of an urban living setting with higher density, which is exactly what's being proposed, minus the single-family homes, which are significant in this particular development. So these are the conversations that I want to have with the Plan Commission and with the council, because out of hand, when folks talk about changing the character of the community because we're adding a development, City of Hudson has planned for this development for a long time. When you look at the actual lay of the land, and when you look at how these buildings will be sited, and when you look at the depression that's out there in the bowl and the fact that these apartment buildings will sit down low and will not actually look like four-story buildings, and when you look at the fact that the neighbors won't see through their tree line and houses and berming and screening, it becomes a different conversation. And that's the degree to which I think we ought to be having this conversation, so that we can get to a point where we can sit down and have meaningful discussions about what we want Hudson to be. And so I hope we can have that conversation. I hope you don't simply dismiss the concept of two four-story buildings because they're four-story, or because they might exist in other communities that have four-story buildings. Well, the reality is that we have a need. The reality is this is the corridor to do it. And the reality is that, you know, that the actual site bears it out. And so when folks on other sites say, go out and see this site, go out and visit it, go out and see this site and walk the Atwood Road up the hill and see what this tree line looks like, because it's a lot different than driving by it and saying there's 40 acres of grass. And it's just, it's completely different. That's all I have. Thank you.
You know, I think that when you take that 40 acres, you're going to develop the land and you're going to do some kind of changing of the land. It's not going to be, you're going to build it on this roller coaster. So you can go out and walk the land, but it's not going to look the same because you're going to excavate it to do a building. Otherwise, you're not going to have as good a building. And not only are we talking our neighbors, are we concerned about our neighborhood? We asked you to partnership with Hudson. We're concerned about the impact of Hudson and what it does and what a 5-story building does in Hudson. Now is it a 4-story? It does change it in Hudson. We're not only talking about ourselves, we're talking about the city of Hudson, to think about what that does and the precedents that you've set. Thank you.
Would it be normal for us at this entity or at the city council level to make a rule that, I mean, kind of random in a sense, that everybody else can build and design things that meet our current rules and regulations and codes and plans, but not those guys and not there? Seems like I mean, we have something that went down on First Street in my district that I had a lot of residents that weren't really happy about. I didn't vote for that. That was before my time, but John did. And I remember him saying to me, boy, there's a lot of people up in arms about that thing going up on First Street, but they're following our guidelines and our rules, so who am I to just be like, well, I don't like that, so not that and not there. I don't know. It just doesn't seem right for me to... you know, that it would be the rules that need to change, not not them and not that and not there. I'm just not comfortable saying, restricting the options on that property before, at this level, before we could see, maybe we tell Plan Commission, okay, if this is one that meets the financial goals of the developer and is feasible, maybe they need to come up with another one that is the shorter version, and then we can look at the different options. Because I like the idea of more green space within a development. I like the variety. There are many things about this development that I actually quite like, and some of you might find that funny coming from me, but yeah, I would not be able to vote for that motion, Jim.
Well, I think you're mistaking the maximum that can be done anywhere with what's acceptable and what's appropriate for the area. The building on First Street was not acceptable for the area. I mean, if you look at that, it's a beautiful building, but it's way out of context. So I think that's what we failed to do then, and that's what we're trying to do now. And we're in a strictly residential area. There's no question about, the commercial stuff is stuff we're going to be adding on the outside. We're putting this right smack in the middle of a residential area. And there are going to be houses, 20 houses, who are going to be back looking at those apartment buildings 60 feet tall. That's, I really wonder about the viability of that.
Well, I think these, the 60-foot,
look
at 60 feet.
Look at the maps of, you're going to have, within 100 feet of that building, you're going to have houses, a row of houses, all surrounding that. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be looking at 60-foot walls. So
but they will choose to buy that home knowing that there's an apartment building there.
Or not. So, again, if you have to, you say, okay, here's some limits in our building codes, but then you have to go down to the part that says it needs to be appropriate for the area. It needs to fit in with the rest of the area. And 60 feet in residential housing.
So you're saying,
so far, that's not a fit in Hudson.
Are you saying you think if they build it that no one will buy the homes around the apartments?
I don't know about that. But there also was a talk about perhaps we need to be doing market studies to determine that. I don't know if I assume that's been done. But where are you going to get the financial information about what's viable there for the developer?
That's the developers.
Pretty much their risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the comment that I wanted to make. Economic viability is not a consideration for the council. I mean, it's simple. This is a question.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We do not want things to develop that don't get completed. So there is some economic viability.
I don't disagree with that, but the economics itself of whether a person is going to buy a house, I mean, that's as was pointed out, it's a risk that the developer takes, and the developer certainly wouldn't build a development that's not viable and that's not saleable. But I understand why the question is being asked, but if economic viability is a reason for denial or a question or concern from a rezoning perspective, it seems highly off base to me in this particular context where the developer is taking on that risk.
You state the motion again, and what is it? Because the Plan Commission is looking for some obviously direction, so.
Sure. Recommended that the Plan Commission look at the height, reject buildings over 60 feet, limit buildings that are not in character with the rest of the development.
That's not how I
Yeah, my understanding from Jim was that we were rejecting the 60-foot height. Is that?
Right. So if
Is that the thrust of your motion?
Yeah.
Because
I too share your concern.
It's over 60 feet.
You said over 60.
Oh,
Over
sorry.
60. I just wanted to.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
But that wasn't what Jim said.
He said reject
He
the
said
60
reject
feet.
it and build it shorter to match everything else in the area, right? That's what I heard
I
you
don't
say.
think he said,
That was the intent. That wasn't what I said. I said reject the 60-foot height that's proposed in the latest letter.
Okay. There was no more to it.
Everybody got it? Anybody else?
Can I ask you guys a couple more questions? Yeah, sorry. So, I'm just looking at the plan here, kind of an aerial view where it lays it out. There's a park to the one, across the street to the one side.
Yes. on the
So
south.
just 2 questions about the park. I guess one of the things I'm thinking, and I love parks, don't get me wrong, but I'm just wondering, like, if it was less high, could there be a building in that area that would accommodate for the additional units that you need to have to make it, economical?
Yeah, again, we're willing to work with you, and if that's something that you wanted us to explore, we certainly could explore it. And is, 3 shorter buildings more interesting than 2 taller buildings? That's certainly something that we would look at if that's the direction that, we, as Nick said, we just want some direction so we know which way to really come back to you with a good comprehensive plan that people can get behind and support, so.
I mean, I think that's something I would maybe encourage the planning commission to look at, not as a motion, but just as a thought that if there's additional space there, that could somehow be brought into it. I hear the biggest concern, I hear the traffic concerns, but correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. I hear the biggest concern is just the height of these buildings. I hear from you guys, you need a certain number of units to make it work, which I totally understand. You're investing a lot. So I'm trying to just suggest some creative thinking in terms of compromise. If they were just somehow shorter, maybe spread out, maybe if you use the park. I think planning could work with that. I'm not on planning, but yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Chip Ross, 2228 Jody Circle. I don't think you heard us correctly.
Okay.
I think the biggest concern is the density. The biggest concern is the amount of humans in that area and what it's going to do for all of the infrastructure, the traffic, the safety, the entire package. The height of it is part of the deal.
Okay.
And I'd really like to see which backside of the house can be seen on those photos. I'd love to know when I can get a copy of those. But I think the thing I'm hearing back here whispered is it's the density. It's just the sheer number of people in that area. That's the big concern.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
I think the Plan Commission is looking for direction, and to flat out reject anything, Jim, would be not in good faith negotiating a project. So I don't think I'm going to support your motion either.
So Randy, what is planning looking for?
The overall, ideas of what exactly, with listening to the residents out there and working with the developers who have worked with us in the past and have proved in the past developments that they are willing to work with this council. So any direction you guys want, let us know now so we can take it back, talk about it. But to flat out reject any height is ridiculous because the economics have to work, Jim. Where are we going to get $2 million to fix the roads ourselves? That is our problem, that we own it for the roads. And this developer's willing to participate in helping us with that. That's pretty cool, for lack of a better term. And, they're helping with Mayor Road. You're redeveloping the whole road for us. No cost to us. We're up against tight levy limits, the budget, and so forth, as you know. To come up with 1.5 or to $2 million to fix it ourselves, where are we going to get that? We've got a lot of other projects facing us. Higgins Street Bridge is a perfect example, or the 11th Street Bridge. That's about $2 million to fix right there. $2 million that this project's going to help offset Carmichael and Vine with good planning and good communication from this council body to the Plan Commission and develop what we can all coexist with. To flat out reject it, Jim, I think that's naive.
Do you have an amendment to the motion, Randy?
I just think, take the reject out. Let us take it. Or are you asking me, or?
Yeah, I mean, you're sitting on the plan commission, you're gonna be hearing this tomorrow, so it help Jim out if you, rather than just have a vote where we turn the motion down, if there's an amendment to it that might make it more palatable. And I don't know, Jim, if you're even willing to hear an amendment, or if you want to vote on it.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, what I'm suggesting is take reject out. Don't take anything off the table, because you don't know what it's gonna look like. We don't know what it's gonna look like when we all finally sit down and negotiate what we can do responsibly.
You could rephrase it in keep the height and appearance of the buildings in more in I can't remember the words that are in the
spirit.
The intent of the I'm still coming up with the wrong words. Congruent with the neighborhood.
And I think that's enough. I think that's good enough for us to figure out what fits out there and listening to the neighborhood.
Does that work? Who seconded it?
I did.
Does that work?
Yeah, that works for me.
Agree to that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion?
Well, can we restate the motion then?
Keep the height and appearance more in congruence with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Height of the buildings and.
Take out.
Reject.
Reject.
Keep the height of the buildings.
That works.
Okay, got it?
Yeah.
Randy, can I ask one question before we go?
Sure.
The suggestion that we work on Vine and Carmichael first before we develop, in your mind, are you saying the two would work together because the developer would be helping pay for the roads?
Yes.
For the improvement. So you're saying it would make sense for us to say, well, let's fix Vine and Carmichael first?
I don't think it's fair for us to ask somebody that we okayed on conceptual plans in February to delay the project any further.
I'm looking for those conceptual plans in February, and I'm not seeing them, so I'm not sure what anybody's talking about here.
So it can be done concurrently.
That's what yeah, okay.
Yes. I have no doubt.
Okay.
Anybody else? Everybody understand the motion?
And Randy, does this motion give you what you feel like you need for the Planning Commission?
I think we've got some direction.
Okay.
Don't you, Mr. Mayor?
I thought that a long time ago, Randy.
Would this mean that they would have to stay to a two-story because everything's two-story, or we can go to the top of people's roof lines, or does this leave everything on the table for these people?
Yes.
Okay.
To negotiate.
Okay.
No.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Now, we're to the point, by the way, as people leave, please be respectful of the fact that we still have work to get done, and we'd appreciate you being kind of quiet on the way out. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can we take a couple-minute recess?
I would really want to get moving here, buddy. We're going to be going into closed session in just a minute.
Okay.
So we are now to the point of citizen comments.
Another meeting.
Is there anybody here that has a comment on anything that is not on the agenda for the evening? Any comments? Any comments? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda. Consent agenda.
Items for the consent agenda. Items for tonight's meeting are as follows. Approve the meeting minutes from the June 3rd, 2019 special council meeting and June 3rd, 2019 regular council meeting. Approve the claims in the amount of $917,768.08. Approve the regular and temporary operator license applications as listed on the issue sheet. Approval of the plans and specifications and authorization to proceed with advertisement for bid for the 2019 storm sewer repairs. Authorization to proceed with the purchase of the street light poles, truss arms, and bases from TAPCO in the amount of $65,700. Approval of the continuation of a conditional use permit for OIC Youth Strategies at 426 Oak Street, Jennifer Nelson. Approval of a conditional use permit application for Madison Avenue Wine and Spirits to operate a winery and distillery at 1510 Swassey Street, Suite B, Kelly Yacum. Approval of a conditional permit application for filing grading within a slope preservation zone and construction of constructional erosion control measures in a slope preservation zone at 5 St. Croix Street, Excel Energy. Approval of a certified survey map for 435 Brick Circle, Town of Troy, KAJ Foods, Terry Jacobson. Approval of final development plans for Luther Chevrolet expansion and site improvement at 1220 and 1250 Crestview Drive, the Luther Company, LLP. Approval of a fence permit and easement agreement at 456 Canyon Boulevard, and Anthony Pahachek. Apply for a Public Service Commission rate case through the Wisconsin Public Commission for water rates. Approve proposal to conduct a sewer rate report study. Place on file the Public Utilities Commission meeting minutes from June 11, 2019, and the first quarter Public Utilities Director report. Approval of amusement device. This is a renewal application, and a renewal application also for the approval of secondhand jewelry. Approval of special event Gopher to Badger race.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second to approve consent agenda. Roll call.
Morissette.
Yes.
Alms.
Yes.
DeZiel.
Yes.
Weber.
Yes.
Atkins Hoggett.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes. Motion's approved. Discussion of possible action on issuing a reserve Class B liquor and Class B beer license.
Over from last meeting.
Yep.
Well, I had asked for this to come back, so
Yeah.
with some more details.
Nelson's here, yes.
So-
Good evening, Andrew Nelson representing Omerta. There were a couple of questions at the last meeting about a number of details with the planned use of the space down on 2nd Street. I had sent out an email to Jennifer. I don't know if the email made it into your packet or not.
No, they have not seen that,
All
I
right.
don't think.
Well, I'll just run through this. There was a question about occupancy. The plans call for occupancy of 57 seats there. The staff on, at any given time on duty is expected to be between 4 and 6, depending on need. The total hires is expected to be between 30 and 40, depending on need. No patio, no rooftop, and then there's some limited parking in the rear of the building. The estimated square footage of the property devoted to use by patrons is expected to be around 1,200 square feet. Fire suppression system will be installed as well pursuant to plan. I have preliminary plans as well. I'm hesitant to put these into the public record. Obviously, if we don't get the approval, we want to maintain some privacy anyway over these plans, but I can certainly pass them out if I'd be open to collecting them anyway.
Well, I think someone will be able to make a public records request if it's something the council is considering, so we can't tell you that they're going to be private. If you're going to give them to the council, they've got to be made part of the record.
What do you want to do? All right.
Thank you.
You?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Make sure Jenny gets one.
Sure. Thank you.
I'll move we approve.
I'll second.
Motion second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. All right, I don't have anything other than the fact that, getting into a late hour here, wanted to recognize our city administrator's last council meeting.
Maybe.
With us, maybe.
Keep hearing me.
Well, your name was floated today with the...
You applied, right?
And I asked for my signature on, and I just signed it.
Yeah, that was it. But anyway, so I mean, Devin has been here for 19 years.
Almost 18.
Almost 18, and seems like 19. And has done a tremendous job, has served a lot of council members, quite a few mayors, and has served the community very well. Devin is a personal friend of mine, has been for a long time, so it was a pleasure also working with him professionally, although it got tense every now and then. But it was an absolute pleasure. We have lost a lot in the way of experience over the course of the last 2 years, and this adds to that loss, significant loss of a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and I can't express enough how much I've appreciated your help in navigating a lot of the things that we're doing here at the city. And I know that I speak on behalf of past mayors, past council members. Hopefully I'm also speaking for anybody that can speak up if you'd like, but I'm speaking for the council members here as well. And so just a little token of our appreciation until you're officially rehired as our... The City of Hudson extends its grateful appreciation to Devin Willey for his 18 years of service as City Administrator. Devin Willey is commended for his dedication and professionalism in serving the City of Hudson and its citizens faithfully, efficiently, ethically, and courteously. The Council extends their appreciation for his service and wishes him well in his retirement and future endeavors, dated the 17th day of June, 2019. Devin, congratulations on your retirement. Good luck.
Let's see if I can get through this or not. It's going to be an emotional few weeks here, so I want to wish the council and mayor all the best as they continue their hard work in making the decisions on the future of this great community. Your job is often a thankless one, and I thank you for your service. And I also want to thank past council members and mayors who've sat in your seat that I've had the pleasure to work with. I especially want to thank the entire city staff, past and current, for their support and friendship these 18 years. I think you all realize that, but you are extremely fortunate to have such a hardworking and amazing group of employees who dedicate themselves every day to making sure Hudson remains the wonderful place that we call home. And as I stated when I notified you that I'd be leaving, I hope that my service to the city has in some small way helped make Hudson a better community for everybody. So thank you. We'll be here for a few more weeks, so July 12th is when I'm handing in my keys, so.
When's the party?
That's an ongoing debate right now. I'm not one for parties, so that's still up for debate with
Unless
the
there's
staff,
Christmas
so.
music.
Yeah, right.
That can be arranged.
All right. Discussion of possible action to convene in a closed session pursuant to A, Wisconsin Statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub C, to consider employment, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility relating to City of Hudson St. Croix EMS employees, and pursuant to B, Wisconsin Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub E, to deliberate regarding possible agreements with St. Croix EMS employees where competitive or bargaining reasons require, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub E, to deliberate regarding negotiating strategy where competitive or bargaining reasons require with respect to possible agreement with Village of North Hudson regarding termination of EMS agreement.
Move to go into closed session.
Second.
Motion and second to go into closed session. Roll call.
Morissette.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
DeZiel.
Yes.
Weber.
Yes.
Atkins Hoggett.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Going into closed session. We'll step across the hall. We are back in open session. We have a motion.
On this
Oh, this is,
separation agreement.
I'll move
I thought there was
to
two.
Whoa.
You're gonna go first?
I move to accept the request to terminate the contract with the Village of North Hudson on the same basis as the Town of Hudson and structure the second payment to be prorated to the last day of service.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll move to direct the city administrator to work with
The labor attorney.
the labor attorney to craft separation agreements for the
Full-time employees.
remaining EMT and three
Remaining
full-time,
full-time employees.
the full-time employees in our EMS.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion?
I just have one clarification. Does this come back for final vote?
Yes. The separation agreements will be
Yeah.
presented,
Written agreement.
will be presented next month to, or next meeting to you for
Okay, thank you.
approval.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Move to adjourn.
Motion- Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned.